Hi everyone, and welcome to Cinema Crave. Today, we're gonna take a look at 5 of the most challenging roles in the history of cinema roles, where the actors truly put their heart and soul into their performances. Some of the people on this list couldn't even shake off their characters for the rest of their lives because of how deeply they got into the role, or because of the extreme pressure some directors put on them. We're also gonna talk about method actors like Daniel Day-Lewis, who pushed himself to unbelievable limits just to make his performances feel more authentic. Every single person on this list has won major awards, and 2 of them even took home Oscars. Though, to be fair, one poor soul actually ended up winning a Golden Raspberry Award instead. Let's start with 2 actresses whose stories will probably shock you once you find out what they went through. Around 50 to 60 years ago, things in Hollywood were very different from how they are today. Back then, directors could get away with doing terrible things to their actors, especially to women, without facing any consequences for their actions. One of the most infamous examples of this is the film Last Tango in Paris, directed by Bernardo Bertolucci. In this movie, Marlon Brando and his co-star were involved in a scene that became highly controversial because the actress had not been informed beforehand about what would happen. The director admitted later that he wanted the moment to feel real, which caused enormous emotional harm to the actress involved. Directors in that era sometimes went to disturbing lengths to get what they wanted from their actors. For example, during the filming of Eyes Wide Shut, Stanley Kubrick intentionally isolated Tom Cruise on set. He reportedly instructed everyone not to engage with him, while he himself would spend time with Nicole Kidman. Kubrick did this for months to build up Cruise's sense of jealousy before shooting a key emotional scene. Similarly, Darren Aronofsky, the director of Black Swan, was known to stir up real-life tension between his 2 lead actresses. He would reportedly speak negatively about one of them to the other, just to heighten the sense of rivalry and make their on-screen conflict feel more genuine. Now, let's talk about Isabelle Adjani, who gave one of the most intense performances in film history. In 1981, she starred in a movie that she later said destroyed my life. Critics and analysts still describe it as one of the darkest and most emotionally exhausting acting experiences ever captured on film. Adjani played a woman who suffers a complete psychological breakdown and experiences a hallucinatory miscarriage, something that her character believes is real but isn't. At that time, filmmaking methods were far less regulated, and the director pushed Adjani to her limits. He reportedly filmed twice as many takes as were ever used, shooting long, continuous scenes lasting 5 or 6 minutes and repeating them dozens of times. Every time Adjani made even the smallest mistake, he would yell at her in front of everyone and humiliate her, saying she didn't know how to act. It went on until she would go home in tears after almost every day of filming. The director's main goal was to push the actress to the very edge of a psychological breakdown so that when the cameras finally rolled, the emotions would be completely real. But he didn't stop there. He later admitted that it wasn't enough for him to humiliate her personally. He wanted her to feel isolated from everyone. He instructed the entire crew not to comfort her or even talk to her warmly. Everyone on set was told to act distant, as if something was wrong with her. The actress began to believe that people were avoiding her because she wasn't doing a good job, while in reality, the director was deliberately isolating her to make her more vulnerable. That kind of emotional isolation, being surrounded by people who pretend you don't exist, is one of the most painful psychological pressures a person can experience. Eventually, the director filmed the scene he had been preparing for, a long 4-minute sequence set in a subway tunnel, where the actress had to portray an intense emotional collapse. The director shot that scene dozens of times, over the course of 7 full days. Every single day, from morning until night, the actress had to perform the same exhausting breakdown again and again, while the director kept shouting at her and pushing her harder each time. By the end, during one of the takes, the actress actually lost consciousness on set. That was the moment when the director finally stopped saying he had achieved what he wanted, that he had taken his actress to the brink of madness. Later on, the actress revealed that she had suffered severe psychological damage after the filming ended. She said the constant humiliation she endured every single day took a deep emotional toll on her. Just imagine having a boss who belittles you in front of everyone for months until you end up in tears. That's what she went through. The shoot itself lasted about 3 months, and after that, she spent 2 full years in therapy. She said her therapist had to convince her that she was a good actress, that the way she had been treated had nothing to do with her talent. Fortunately, something good did come out of it. In 1981, she won the César Award, which is often called the French equivalent of the Oscars for Best Actress. But even then, she admitted that it took her many years to completely recover from the psychological trauma. She's still alive today, and she has never appeared in another horror film since. Now, let's move on to another very similar story, and this one might sound even more shocking. The director who made Possession had actually been inspired by another filmmaker, Stanley Kubrick. Just 1 year earlier, in 1980, Kubrick had put his own actress through an even more extreme experience while filming The Shining. That actress was Shelley Duvall, whose entire career changed after that film. Kubrick was famously perfectionist and demanding. For instance, during Eyes Wide Shut, he filmed one simple party scene over 100 times, a Guinness World Record, though that scene didn't push the actors emotionally. But for The Shining, things were completely different. Shelley Duvall had to endure that same perfectionism while playing in a psychological horror film. The shoot lasted 13 months, and during that entire time, she was completely isolated on set. No one behind the camera was allowed to talk to her. Kubrick constantly criticized her, forcing her to repeat scenes over and over until she broke down in tears. While Kubrick was known to be tough on everyone, most of the other actors could handle it better. For example, the famous scene where Jack Nicholson breaks down a door with an axe was filmed 44 times, meaning he actually chopped through 44 doors. And the scene where Shelley Duvall swings a baseball bat at Nicholson, that took 127 takes over 7 days of filming, even working through weekends, often for 16 hours a day. She screamed, cried, and repeated the scene so many times that the stress began to take a physical toll. Under that level of pressure, her body became dehydrated. When stress is that extreme, the brain stops recognizing thirst and she grew weak. Her hair started falling out, and the redness and swelling you see on her face in the movie are not makeup at all. They're the real effects of exhaustion and days of continuous crying on set. This left Shelley Duvall with lasting psychological scars. In the early years after the film, she never spoke badly of Kubrick back then. Few actresses felt safe criticizing powerful directors. She used to say that he had pushed her to give her best performance, but around 10 to 20 years later, she finally spoke out, saying that Stanley Kubrick had broken her during filming. Many film analysts now believe that the psychological problems she faced in later years were a direct result of that experience. After the release of The Shining, Shelley Duvall fell into a long-term depression. She began to experience anxiety and a noticeable loss of confidence, made even worse by an unfortunate twist of fate. When the film first came out, many critics mocked her performance. She was even awarded a Golden Raspberry, which meant that all the humiliation she had endured on set was repeated again in the real world. Over time, she slowly withdrew from Hollywood and eventually retired from acting altogether in the 1990s. Friends and colleagues later said she became increasingly isolated. Then, in 2016, she appeared on the TV show Dr. Phil in what became a shocking interview. During the conversation, Shelley Duvall said that Robin Williams was still alive, that he had changed his appearance and was living among us, and she also claimed that FBI agents were following her. By that point, her condition had clearly progressed beyond depression. She was suffering from delusions and paranoia. The interview raised serious concern about her mental health, and around that time, she publicly stated that The Shining had been the most difficult experience of her life. She had spent roughly 20 years living in near-complete isolation. Eventually, she passed away, and the exact nature of her mental illness was never fully confirmed. Many believe she may have had a predisposition to psychological disorders, but that the extreme stress and emotional strain she endured while working with Kubrick intensified her condition until it became unmanageable. In 2022, the organizers of the Golden Raspberry Awards officially apologized and withdrew her nomination, even going as far as to honor her performance instead. But by then, it was too late. Her story had already become one of the most tragic in Hollywood history. Now, Let's move on to the next two actors, both of whom actually won Oscars, and both of whom pushed themselves to their absolute limits on purpose. The first one is Leonardo DiCaprio for his unforgettable performance in The Revenant. Even under normal circumstances, DiCaprio is known as a master of his craft. Many of you have probably seen behind-the-scenes footage from The Wolf of Wall Street, where the moment someone yells, "Action!" it's as if DiCaprio instantly transforms into an entirely different person, stepping into another reality altogether.
Set. Set and background and action.
Hey, we'll talk in a minute. Thanks.
Before The Revenant, Leonardo DiCaprio had spent several years chasing the Oscar that kept slipping through his fingers. He had already been nominated 4 times, but every single time he lost to the point that the internet started turning it into a joke. There were memes everywhere making fun of the fact that DiCaprio couldn't win an Oscar. So this time, DiCaprio decided that he was gonna win no matter what it took. And what he put himself through for The Revenant was something very few actors in history have ever done. DiCaprio later said, "I wasn't acting in this film, I was just trying to survive." And he wasn't exaggerating. To prepare for the role, he trained extensively in wilderness survival. He learned how to start a fire from scratch, how to use an antique rifle, and even hired a Native American language expert to teach him 2 old indigenous dialects. He studied with a doctor who specialized in medicinal plants to learn how to make herbal remedies and treat wounds, all to bring authenticity to the character. With the director's approval, they intentionally made the filming conditions as brutal as possible. They shot in the wild landscapes of Canada and Argentina, in temperatures below 0, without the comfort of modern facilities. They really camped outdoors, right beside frozen rivers, and the entire crew was at risk of frostbite. DiCaprio genuinely used his survival skills, building his own fires and warming himself next to them between takes. In one famous scene, he actually bit into a raw bison liver, no special effects, no props, because he wanted his reaction to be completely real. He later said he immediately threw up afterward. And that scene where he climbs inside a dead horse to survive the freezing cold, that was real too. The horse carcass was authentic, and he actually lay inside it to stay warm. DiCaprio said he pushed his body to its absolute physical limit farther than he ever thought possible. When filming ended, his health completely crashed. For months, he suffered from exhaustion and recurring illnesses caused by the harsh conditions. But in the end, it all paid off. After missing out 4 times, Leonardo DiCaprio finally won the Oscar for Best Actor in 2016. He also won the Golden Globe and BAFTA awards that same year, proving once and for all that his dedication had been worth it. But all the extreme things Leonardo DiCaprio did to win his Oscar were actually inspired by someone else, Daniel Day-Lewis. Daniel Day-Lewis is often called the master of method acting. For those who may not know, method acting is a technique where the performer doesn't just pretend to be the character, they actually become that character in real life. The actor tries to experience the same emotions, habits, and struggles as the person they're portraying, so that their reactions on camera come from genuine memory and emotion, not imitation. Daniel Day-Lewis is the ultimate example of this approach. For every role he's ever taken, he completely immerses himself in the character and stays in that mindset, even when the cameras aren't rolling. For instance, while preparing for Gangs of New York, he actually apprenticed as a butcher for 2 months, learning how to cut and prepare meat just like his character. All those scenes where he's chopping animal carcasses with a cleaver, those are his real movements. He's genuinely performing the craft, not pretending. He also lived for an entire year under conditions similar to the 19th century, the era in which the film is set. For weeks at a time, he wouldn't take a bath, wore authentic leather clothing from that period, and refused to use any modern conveniences, even off-set. Because of that, he caught pneumonia during the freezing New York winter. Still, he refused to wear a modern coat or see a doctor, insisting that he remain completely in character. To portray his glass-eyed character, he wore thick glass contact lenses for months, even training himself not to blink for long periods of time. And in that famous scene where he taps the knife against his fake eye, that was real too. He was actually hitting the contact lens in his own eye, which made it impossible for him to see out of that side while filming. And yet, everything he went through for Gangs of New York was nothing compared to what he did for another film, My Left Foot. Daniel Day-Lewis was only 32 years old when he took on that role, playing a man with cerebral palsy who could move only one part of his body, his left foot. Believe it or not, 3 months before filming even began, Daniel Day-Lewis put himself in a wheelchair and stayed in it for the entire duration of the shoot. But it wasn't just about sitting in a wheelchair. He tried to live exactly as someone with cerebral palsy would. He even hired a nurse to care for him on set, feeding him, moving him, and incredibly helping him with his most basic needs. He did all of this on purpose, wanting to experience the same sense of dependency and loss of dignity that someone with that condition might feel in real life. For 7 months, he only used his left foot the same as his character. He learned to paint and write using that foot, refusing to break character even between takes. The crew had to physically carry him from place to place, and the result of staying in that contorted position for so long was serious. He developed stress fractures in 2 ribs. Now, this wasn't the kind of fracture caused by a sudden injury. It was what doctors call a stress fracture, the kind that happens when the body is kept under constant physical strain for an extended period of time. It's the same kind of injury that marathon runners sometimes get when their bones develop tiny cracks from repetitive pressure. Day-Lewis literally pushed his body beyond its natural limits. He later said that the experience left him with chronic back pain that still affects him to this day, a lasting reminder of what he put himself through for the role. And what's even more fascinating is that after filming ended, he spent 4 months in what he called a decompression period, trying to separate himself from the character. But he admitted that he never truly could. He said, "That role changed me forever. I realized how limited and fragile human beings really are. I've never been as proud or arrogant since, because that experience became a part of who I am." In the end, Daniel Day-Lewis won the Oscar for Best Actor in 1990 for his performance in My Left Foot, his very first Academy Award. He would go on to win 2 more Oscars later in his career, making him the only male actor in history to win the award 3 times for leading roles.
Yeah, I know what that is.
And now, the final actor on our list, Tom Hanks for Castaway. By the time he started this project, Tom Hanks was already one of the most respected actors in Hollywood. Filming began in 1998 after he had already won back-to-back Oscars in 1994 and 1995. So by the late 1990s, he was setting his sights on another Oscar-worthy performance, and Castaway would become one of the most transformative experiences of his career. In Castaway, Tom Hanks played a man stranded on a deserted island for several years. Filming was done in 2 phases. In the first phase, Hanks appeared at his normal weight and filmed the early, everyday life scenes of his character. Here's where it gets astonishing. The film was then paused for an entire year. During that time, Tom Hanks isolated himself on a remote island. He lost 25 kilograms, let his hair and beard grow, and spent hours walking under the sun, fully transforming into the appearance of a castaway. As the second phase of filming approached, he took the method acting even further. He lived entirely on the island, avoiding showers and bathrooms, following an extremely strict diet. During this period, he came up with the idea of the iconic volleyball friend, a concept that wasn't even in the original script. Hanks later said that all of the emotions he projected onto the ball were real. He truly watched it and spoke to it as if it were alive. Because of the extreme physical demands, filming sessions were limited to only 2 or 3 hours a day. Despite the precautions, Hanks once cut his foot. The wound seemed minor, but he and the director decided to treat it as if he were truly stranded with no access to a doctor. Unfortunately, the wound became infected and eventually entered his bloodstream, a serious risk that could have affected vital organs. Hanks developed a high fever, and hospital staff warned that just an hour's delay could have landed him in the intensive care unit, potentially costing his life. Filming had to stop for a full month due to this infection. After recovering, Hanks continued the shoot under the same harsh conditions. Although his performance was extraordinary, he did not win the Oscar. When the film was released, it was critically acclaimed. Hanks did win the Golden Globe for Best Actor in 2001, but he was only nominated for the Oscar and did not take home the award. And that concludes our video on 5 of Hollywood's most challenging roles. I might make more videos like this in the future, so thank you for watching until the end. If If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it and stay tuned for the next one from the channel. Goodbye.